Now, I myself do not have Vi in my conscious powers, but I do understand it through my unconscious other, and these lovely ladies back here both have Vi in their conscious powers. So, the Vi signal of concern. Concern is a word similar to caring in that it has a lot of meanings that you could interpret all the powers having it, in that all the 8 powers are concerned about that concept that is intrinsic to them. So for example, Jai, harmony. It's very concerned about harmony. So we're not going to use that very broad use of the term concern. We're using more specific use of that word to give it a meaning that will have layers that you can kind of feel when you see it. So what are the layers? What are the impacts you should be feeling? It's a concern that you've missed something. Now, that automatically kind of brings up 2 powers. And it's like some of the other powers we've done, I think it's helpful to accentuate why of the 8 siblings it's seen as the concerned sibling. Vi is that sister, that brother, the concerned one. Why? It's because it's concerned if you have forgotten. Now there's another power similar to that, and that is Nai. And Nai and Vi do share a lot in common, although they're very different. And that's because they are the 2 siblings that could address the subjective perception, the worldview. So they're very directive in nature. So there's an insistency. So that's why you have frustration. Frustration is a kind of insistency. Concern is another one. So that's what I'm hinting at. This kind of concern is an insistency. And only Vi has that kind of same insistency, except for Nai. The difference is, what are they being insistent about you missing? For Nai, it's that you don't know something. There's something you have missed in that you never knew it, but it's there to be known, and that's important, and you shouldn't do anything else until you figure out what that is. The frustration comes because you don't know what you're going after. Okay, Vi shares the same imperative quality, but it does know what it's going after because Vi is concerned with the known. So it's not frustration at getting at what is missed, it's concern at whether or not it has found it. So similar like going through like a lot of records, and you know it's in there somewhere, you just have to make sure you get it. So there's concern of whether or not you've missed it. Have you gone through the A through Z and gone over it? Because if so, you'll have to go back because it's in there, because it's known. So when Vi gets called, the first thing the psyche will feel is, are you forgetting something? Have you checked the records? Because it sounds simple, but it's not. V and Vi are concerned with processes of the psyche that may seem normal, but actually they don't, in this context, take up as much time as you might think. So the 5 senses actually are only 1/8. And in this case, memories are really only 1/8. So the psyche does lots of other things other than remember things specifically. So Vi comes from the point of view that anything you're looking at, similar to Nai, there is missing information. So it is concerned at the beginning that the other powers are working with insufficient data. That's a concern. Okay, and they know it's known data. So they're concerned that there's known data that should be informing on it that is not being used. So they're that sibling. They're the sibling that thinks, did you remember that you're supposed to take the trash out today? Did you remember that the way you cook those pancakes, you like to do it for 4 minutes, you like it better that way? Things like that. So all kinds of little things that other siblings, the other 7 pod powers, may forget. Because all of the powers do things, but they don't notate them. Vi notates not only itself, but it notates for all the other powers. So it not only is it concerned about whether or not the individual person in a conscious, unconscious way, if they brought in enough of the memories, enough of the information to be sufficient. But there's also just a general concern of the other 7 powers that they're operating always with insufficient information. Because it's true, from Vi's position in the psyche, it knows more details about the ongoings of the other pod powers than they know themselves. So there's an ongoing concern that people are working with insufficient information, and they'll be doing things sloppily or incorrectly or missing things. That kind of highlights how, as a subjective perception power, it shares that quality of insistency with Nai, but it's about remembering something, for example, a good analogy or a good example would be in a test. You're taking the test and you see a problem and you're trying to go get the answer. Like, this reminds you of an actual problem from the test prep thing you worked on. You're like, ooh, this is that sample. There is a tickling because even though you know it, this is important to understand about Vi, there are degrees of knowing it. That's the word. There are degrees of accessibility. So when you're taking a test, before you go in, you would want to massage the known, because there's degrees of it, and there's a range of the known that's more gray. You did know it, you did learn it, it did happen to you or whatever, but it may be more or less noted, and it may be more or less further back in time since that was there. So you're going in to take a test, and maybe it's about science. So you need to check to make sure you have brought those memories closer to the surface, because they're going to be more relevant. So Vi constantly takes the position, similar to Nye, about you've missed something that you've never seen before, but it's taking the point of view of there is a super vast amount of detailed information, and you can only hold a small amount of it in your conscious mind. So it always wants to give you more relevant information. So like Nye, we mentioned holding a glass. As it holds a glass of water, the Nye will give it speculations by holding it. It will keep tickling it to follow a thought. Vi also has that same very strong, very pronounced tickling effect, and that's why it's very directive in nature of you should go back into your mind and check on something. Very much like there's something relevant, and you go back in and you remember perhaps how many glasses of water you had that day, or perhaps you remember that this glass, the way you're holding it, it broke. You've held glasses like this before, they're very thin. You shouldn't hold them the way you're holding it, you should hold it some other way. That's information you do know. But you could be doing an action, all the 7 pod powers could be doing an action, mental or physical, that is going against good sound information that you do have. So that's what Vi's concern is, that there's actually good sound information that could be informing on that, such as, I can adjust my hand on this kind of stemmed glass so I don't break the stem like I did last time. I've held one of these glasses before, and so I know that now. But if I was just holding the glass, and perhaps I'll use the ladies here since they have the Vi, perhaps you were focusing on your knee, enjoying the abstractions in the environment. Perhaps you were resonating with the music or something and letting it hit you. You really enjoy the singer. There's other things a psychic could be doing and not notice that this glass is very similar to a glass that you've broken in your hand before. Does that make sense? So that information is there, but now there's going to be what you consider an error. And that's important. All the different siblings have errors, playing errors of the psyche they consider to be more horrendous to do. So in Vi's case, that's just the worst. Similar to Nye, they do share this quality, which is why subjective perceivers, although the Vi alpha and Nye alpha are very different, they do share this. It's sort of like, geez, people or systems, how could you make a mistake like that? It's very strong that way. It's why it has concern and frustration. You can kind of see have a similarity there, and that's why, because it's like, if you had just thought about it more, if you would just access your memories, that information you learned last Tuesday. Last Tuesday you were told that there was going to be a fire drill today. Why did you come in unaware there's a fire drill? That's information that was available and you didn't access it. So that's what makes Vi concerned. This way of being will cause the other pod powers to think that Vi, you're a concerned sibling. And thus the other mojos and social alchemies will interpret what Vi is doing as being concerned with missing nothing. Nye is frustrated at what is missed, and Vi is concerned that nothing is missed. And that concern can never be fully satisfied, because like Nye, it's a perception power, it keeps expanding. So the more Nye goes into new vistas, all it does is show off where there's more vistas. Vi's the same way. The more you remember details about last Tuesday, the more of them that could be informing on you. In fact, the higher Vi is in your hierarchy, the more you keep drinking in memories, and it would make you feel that you are going to play better. In fact, the concern is that, similar to, and again, it's like Nye this way, that this incredibly vital feed of information would be cut off too soon. Yes, when Nye goes out there, there's a frustrated feeling of trying to go in the waters and find it. That's the reaching. Vi shares something with V in that it's incremental. It's a literal power, so they're incremental. So it's kind of like it's receiving top secret data over the line, and it's getting like a story unfolding of an agent's dossier. And the longer they're getting the feed, the more information on some agent that they may need to interact with or some system is getting built up. There's a concern, like Nye, different way, that will get cut off. Because as soon as they lose that, they only have the information from the inner dossier, that memory dossier that they reached for. That's important to understand with Vi. There's a huge amount of memory, far more than you could ever get. So there's a question of, did you get enough? It's known data, but is it enough known data, and is it the most pertinent, correct, relevant information? And we'll get into power flows in a second here and see why that flavors all the things that Vi does. It's very concerned about enough and correct. Enough, I'll use the word relevant. Enough, relevant, accurate. That's the three things. And it can never be enough information, and it can never be relevant enough, because similar to the way V can drink in blue until it's just more blue and more blue. Vi is like playing a scene back in the mind, very detailed, so to speak, so that the more you did it, it's like you're watching a YouTube video and you're playing it over and over and over, and you can stop and pause and slow-mo it. Vi has all those powers, so the longer it gets to play with a clip, it will keep getting information, even if it's the same memory. If Vi goes back to remember like a training event it had last Tuesday, if it's in the thick of a situation where it needs to get that information, the longer the Vi goes into it, it will remember more of the information, it will be more nuanced, and that will give, which both these powers have, sureness. The more the Vi drinks in and remembers what they were supposed to do, for example, from class last Tuesday, if they remember it for a second, that will give them some from the Vi. The more they do it, they will have it. It will be concrete in their mind, like they were literally there again in a certain way, or that the memory of it, like Nye, is as strong as real life. That's very important. It's very directive nature. So it's almost like they're building up a stone construct in their mind. It's a model, but imagine it's a model that's built up like a toy model, where there's like lots of little parts, and every second that you are allowed to add, it builds. Like the little matchstick kind of things. You can make these vast, unbelievably intricate, constructs, but it takes time. And so Vi wants, like Nye, the most time to keep doing that as possible, because it can't be good enough. There's always more. So forever there's this, okay, go with it, but you should come back and get more. Is that enough? Did you have it? For all the siblings, when it kind of hands off a little file of information, of memories, it's always like, and if you need more, come back, because this is probably not enough. And tell you what, while you go out there and do your Z thing, your G thing, your knee, your V, whatever, I'm gonna go back in here and get more files for you. So just come back in here, because, it can be a little stick in the mud-ish, but that is a very important sibling to have, because otherwise we would not have the first aid kit when we're out in the woods. We would forget that. So it's very important that we have Vi, because there's certain details that do not occur naturally to you. That's important. Vi has a lot to do with memes in a great way. Of all the powers, I would say that Vi is the most relevant to memes, although the other powers go with that as well. And on the positive side of that is, we were not technically designed to speak English. We were designed to emote, the mojos, the configurations, the cues you give off, the nonverbal. That was designed, but not Japanese, not English, not specifically. Does that make sense? That had to be learned. But that was a really cool thing to learn. It's kind of like when the one primate did the trick and then learned that they could use a stick in this way. This is important. That is a quantity of knowledge. If it can get passed on, this is the concern, and not dropped, then all the primates can keep doing it, and it could go on from that primate to other primates in that collective, and it could go on beyond those primates of that generation. That's huge. Vi has a lot to do with tradition and handing down of good information that was very fortuitous or very hard fought for information that you wouldn't want to have to learn from scratch. So that's where Vi can help out is, for example, do you want to learn, because last time's how you learned. You cracked the glass because you never held one of these weird, super thin stemmed ones before, and you cracked it, and then you got a new glass and you continued on with what you were doing. That's how you learned in that first scenario. You could learn that way every time. If you think about this, if Vi wasn't there, you could learn those lessons the first time, every time. A lot of lessons, a lot of things you don't want to learn like that. You want to actually have learned it once and go, okay, I'm going to hold on to that because that's probably going to come up again. And if it does, I want to know what it means. I want to have some sort of context for that. I'll go to the power flows. The first, I mentioned already a little bit, but the recall and call to remember. That's important because it sounds simple, but it really is not. As I mentioned before, the five senses, that sounds like, oh, that's normal. That does not occupy as much of the psychic space as you would think. There are many of the powers, like dynamics and so forth, that are doing other things that are equally important. So for Vi, there is a concern that, and it's true, the other powers will not voluntarily take a time out to go check the records. And they should. There's lots of times when all the pod powers, both in your brain and in the brain of other humans and in collectives of them, such as social alchemies, they should be doing that. But they're not going to because they all have their own agenda, their own concepts, right? That they're like, I'm all about harmony, I'm all about perfection. So they're not going to do it voluntarily. They're not going to think to do that. So it's that age-old thing, like parents like, how did you not remember to take your books after I told you to take your books? Because the child forgot to remember. That sounds funny, but you really, if you've ever been in public speaking and you start talking and then afterwards there was a moment where you were stumped and then you remember, I actually knew something then. If you could have remembered that when you were up there, you actually could have had maybe 5-10 minutes more of really great conversation to unfold for whoever you were dialoguing with. But because you couldn't remember that story, you didn't remember some detail. For example, someone's talking to you and they mentioned something about last Tuesday, something, and you don't get the tickle, or at least you don't feel it strong enough that last Tuesday something unusual happened or something different or something relevant to what they're saying happened. If you think of that, you go, wait a minute, do you go to the chiropractor on such and such street? Yes, I do. And all of a sudden a whole new amount of information and connection with this other person or system unfolds, but only if you had remembered that relevant detail. If not, it doesn't exist. So you're like, wow, it's like a needle in a haystack. It is like a needle in a haystack, and that's where Vi comes at things. It's that one detail. It's that one phone number. In fact, it's not just the one phone number, it's all 7 digits. Because it could be that 7th digit you don't have and then you don't have a phone number. So again, remember, digit 1, digit 2, digit 3, that's Vi getting its internal feed and it's concerned of what? I hope it doesn't get cut off. You can see it right here in this kind of example, like if you were getting like do, well, what good is 4 or 5 numbers? I mean, it's better than 1 or 2, but then I have to guess. And this is a little power, but it doesn't want to guess. It wants to have it. And so it needs all 7 digits. Before that starts, there has to be an initiator of that feed. So there is a concern not only getting later on of it getting cut off, but there is an amount of time it takes for that to come in. So not only is it getting cut off, did it get started soon enough? Because, for example, and it's true, both Nai and Vi very much are into internally preparing yourself. For example, you're going to go into a meeting or a high energy thing, is both of them want you to go in and get that inner information that's going to give you the most relevant info for what you're about to do. So from Vi's point of view, if you thought or remembered something relevant 5 minutes earlier, you'll get like a bank count. You'll get 5 minutes, which provides a lot of information. Imagine a secret agent from your handler getting like secret code names, a list of enemy agents or good agents that are out there, and you get 5 minutes of that transmission or 10 minutes. Do you understand? Well, that's a big deal, and that's Vi's concern. is that you're not going to get it. And if you don't start the transmission soon enough, and you don't basically have the other power shut up and let that transmission complete, it doesn't do the picture developing thing like Nye does, but it does share that model, that inner model, and it has a point at which it's complete. And it's not complete, it's not as strong as it should be. If you only get 5 minutes of dossier information of remembering an event, or let's say you're getting ready for a test, perfect example. You may have studied 2 hours, but if you go to a test, for example, and 15 minutes prior, you are not thinking about the 2 hours you studied, it will not be there for you, not as much. Now, you don't want to overdo it, of course, and there's all kinds of things about studying techniques, but it is very helpful that you give some time to rest your brain, but then when it comes time for that relevant event, a time period prior, you can talk what your own ritual is, but definitely some minutes prior, you would want to begin going through it again, retouching that information, getting it back up above the surface. Both Nye and Vi are below the waters. The difference is with Nye, you're fishing around the waters trying to figure out what's there you've missed. With Vi, it has submerged since the last time you checked on it, which is a concern. Every time you step away from Vi, its massive cathedral of remembered sensory details starts to submerge. It starts to become rusty, starts to become dusty. So the longer you would have in a library to dust off the shelves, to reacquaint yourself with the files, the more prepared you would be for anything you were asked for. So if someone asked you for something out of that internal library and you were in it, kind of the Nye waters, if you're swimming in those archives, you could come get it out much quicker and have it. And there is a loss of that when you go to the powers. You have to reacquaint yourself with your own memories. That sounds weird, but you do, because only the most relevant memories are actually in the surface of where your apparatus is, and everything else is outside of that. So right there, the concern of, do you start the transmission of remembered information soon enough? Is it left undisturbed, and is it allowed to complete? So those are 3 things. Start enough, do not tamper with it, because like Nye, it's very concerned with toxicity. It has an internal information, it's not when outside influences messing it up, you know what I mean? So when that information is coming in, not only must the transmission for the secret agent start soon enough, there must be no tampering, no one eavesdropping, no one tweaking the instrument that I'm using to get this information in. Both Nye and Vi are very kind of paranoid about that, the information, because it's internal, personal information, and so just like the towers are very, protective that way, in a discernment way, Vi and Nye are very protective of their information. That goes next to memories and experience. The first one is recall, call to remember. The concern was, did you start the transmission of those memories soon enough? But with their memories themselves, there is a concern that they not be diluted, they not be tampered with, that my current feelings or system dynamics or whatever else is going out here or in my brain is not somehow tampering with the evidence, not tampering with my memories, not making me remember. Because like Nye, Nye's the most independent-minded because it's actually shrugging everyone else off based on speculation. But Vi is also extremely strong-willed. It, like Nye, shrugs off the other powers in that it's like, shh, I have to get this information, and if I listen to you in any way, it will make the information not raw. It will be tampered with. And Vi's position, like Nye, is to pull information out from the near to far unconscious waters, and to get all of it, and to have it be absolute fidelity. Do you ever know what I mean? Kind of like in sound quality and information transfer from files. Nye and Vi, absolute fidelity to the information that's in there. Now with Nye, it's a frustration of, are you getting that information? With Vi, it does remember that it had the correct information, but if you go through the files and you have fumbly fingers, you'll muck up information you actually know. And Vi gets very annoyed at that, and it is concerned that its other siblings are going to do it. They're going to be fumbly and sloppy with the information. And then you can even have good information and it won't be correct because you didn't handle it right. You weren't meticulous. We'll get to that later. So, exact information, verifiable data. You can reach in the waters and pull out anything. For example, Vi would be concerned that you reach in the waters and pull out some nigh, which wouldn't necessarily be bad, but from Vi's point of view, that's not helpful for its process. That is going to be that would tell Vi it doesn't need to be there. So that is not within Vi's way of thinking. Just like with Nye, knowing things, why am I even here? I'm only here when I don't know things. So Vi's position is we do know something and we need to go get it. So when we get it, it needs to be what we went to go get. That's concern. So imagine like Nye, it's fishing around the waters. It's not frustrated, it's concerned. Is that it? Is that it? Is that it? Tuesday. It was last Tuesday. Cheryl last Tuesday. Because when it went in to get something. It was tickled to get something, so it's concerned when it's fishing, is it getting the right information and is getting enough of it? Next, verifiable. Vi will be concerned that when it pulls an information out, it's going to give it to another power. Similar to Nye. Nye is frustrated that the other powers won't accept it, which often happens because it's unprecedented. But with Vi, it's concerned that the other powers won't see it. Similar to Nye that way, but the difference is Vi will take the point of view of it can prove to the powers the information is there if it's verifiable. So when it's in there, not only does it want the exact information, it wants enough. So it has that evidence. It doesn't like to talk to the siblings without evidence. Does that make sense? So it's concerned that it has it, then it's concerned when it hands it off that they get it. They take the whole thing because it's only evidence if it is sufficient. If I give you 10 files of Vi and you drop 2 of them, that might not be enough to win the case. So there's a concern like, I went and got you the exact information and it verifies what's needed, so I need you, this concern, to verify. So once verification from those of it hands off. So it's concerned that it gets exact verifiable information, and then it's concerned that when it transmits this to the other powers, or the mojos, that they are doing that. Because otherwise, the fidelity, like in audio, sound audio, video audio, you're only as good as your connections. So Vi is concerned in the beginning that it's not the weak link of that fidelity, exact information, verifiable information chain. But once it pulls out of the waters and then it's going to give it to their powers, it's concerned they don't muck it up. So they're like, don't drop any of this. That's concerned. So when it hands off, it's like, don't drop any of this because it works as verifiable information for whatever we were concerned about, whatever the system, whatever the people wanted, whatever was going on, but only if you keep it like I gave it to you. That's important. Keep it like I gave it to you. It works if you keep it like I gave it to you. So that's Vi's position. Okay. Point of view, practicality, specificity. This relates again to the dual, I already kind of highlighted there. Ooh, rocket, make yourself happy. But the dual relationship of concern both for themselves and for the other powers and mojos they're connecting with. So with practicality, specificity, when Vi is tickled or it tickles the psyche to go into it, it wants to make sure that what it comes back with is exact information, verifiable data, so that it gives practical, specific information that is going to alleviate this lack of information, because that's what there's some sort of gulf, there's some sort of hole of information and it needs to fill that hole. That's different from Nye. Nye is finding holes that you don't know what are there. Vi, there are holes in information, but they know what those holes are, so they want to go get that information and plug that hole. So that also means handing it off. Again, that information has a specific shape, a specific size, a specific texture, and so forth, and details, very specific details. And so when it's given off to the other powers or to other people, in articulation for example, there is a need to understand the specific and practical nature that this information is going to be used for, because it's relevant 2 ways. It's relevant that when another person or system asks for something, when the other pod powers ask for something, that Vi understood the specific practical reason you want this, because that'll affect how it goes in the waters and looks for the data. It makes sense? It's kind of like someone like at your work asks you for information. Why do you want this? That's important. It needs to know why, because then it can go get it. Then when it comes back, it wants to know how you're going to use it. Because if you may have asked for certain information, that calls for specific practical go-getting of it on your part. But then when you bring it back, they must then use it in a specific practical way. Because sometimes, like me, and me will do this, they may ask for information for some reason, but after they get it, they then turn around and use the information for some other purpose. Not really intentionally, but after they get the information, they're like, oh, you know what? I could do this with it. Vi is the opposite of me. No, you asked for the information, pod powers and mojos, for a specific reason. So specific data was gotten that plugged that specific hole. If you use it for some other hole, there are no guarantees. Vi is very much about insurance. Now, there's no guarantees if you use this information for some other purpose than the specific practical reason that was why I went and got it. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like, I disavow all knowledge of what happens with you people if you use it for some other reason than what I did. So it's like a concern of understanding that, like, I'm giving the information this fidelity form. If you want to keep working, you keep in the fidelity form. You don't, hey, on you. So Vi kind of has that, it's on you if you step away from the fidelity, which I have so carefully kept with the information. Stability, security. This relates to transferring it between two conduits. So from the Vi has information, and now the information is going to transfer in some way between multiple people, multiple systems, things like this. Replication, repetition. And again, it sounds simple, but it's not, because this is Vi's purview and it doesn't take up all the psyche's time. It's doing other things. That shouldn't change information. But Neil does naturally. Neil will take information the first time and go, yay, I'm not gonna do this with it. Which now Vi's like, wait a minute, that wasn't the intent. But all kinds of powers, all kinds of mojos, all kinds of situations and systems will do that through multiple transfers and multiple repetitions. For example, the age-old analogy of you say like a short story, we're talking like just a few sentences long, into one person's ear, like in a cafeteria, and they tell the story from one end of the cafeteria to the other, and at the end of it is completely different. That story, you see it before, it's like an old, like a kind of a cliche, but it is true. And that is what Vi just is very concerned about, because the story, as they told it, had sufficient information, sufficient nuanced information, sufficient nuanced relevant information. And the only reason that went away was because you didn't tell it right. You didn't continue to transfer the information the way Vi did. Because Vi does this. It has the most fidelity to remember details when it goes in. So when it goes to the unconscious, to its conscious, it is absolute fidelity. And then when it hands from its conscious to the other powers, it's like fidelity. Say fidelity before I give it to you. So from where it is, it knows it's not going to mess it up. Does that make sense? But once it releases, it will keep coming back to check, because correctly so, as it releases it, and now Xi hands it off to Zai hands it off to Jai hands it off to this. When Vi comes back and checks on that, the chances of that data being just like it was when it gave it are slim to none. So it's very concerned about that. Rightly so. Now, the powers need to do things with data, play with it, crunch it, calibrate it, so it suits them. But this shouldn't actually morph data into being something it's not, and it does happen. Because other powers, when they're using Vi to remember details, facts, figures, experiences, so forth, it's for the purposes. So if it fits in with what they're doing, that power is not naturally going to think, oh, that's a problem. Not as long as Jai is harmonious, not as long as Zai feels perfect, not as long as Xi is connected with the people, there's not a problem. But there could be significant loss of fidelity of remembered experience, remembered data, before the other powers raise, a stink. So it's Vi's job in the psyche to be the first one that says, okay, I think that story has gotten a little embellished. Now, granted, there are degrees of embellishment, there are degrees of variation of things like this. Vi is supremely aware of the nuance of that, and when someone says, and Bob said such and such. No, actually, they'll change one word in that sentence. But from Vai's point of view, that's the slippery slope. That's the beginning of the cafeteria experiment. That's how it starts. You change one word in how someone said something from a past event. You change one remembered detail of a dossier. That's how the corruption of the data begins. So Vai is very much, do not let corruption of data begin ever, because once it starts, it's like a mold. Does that make sense? It's a mold that gets over all the data, and then it's very hard to trust that data. And that's the whole point of having remembered experiences, is that when you're in situations or experiences, discernments or perceptions where you aren't quite sure, you need some ground to hold on to. Nai and Vai, they are the most like bedrock of all the powers. They are what you know. Even more so than the towers, which are your position. Vai and Nai are literally what you think existence is. That's your understanding of stuff. So you need, especially if Vai is in your conscious side, your conscious spore, to have a good connection with it, because the meticulous nature of its construction is the strength of that model, and that's the power of it. For example, if you're out doing some artistic thing or some physical thing, and there is a technique you're supposed to use while you're doing either one of those things, if you remember it partially, you'll do partially okay with it. It's that simple. So Vai's point of view is you want all the data, and you want absolutely raw, untouched, unblemished, and then you can chop it down. But it wants the chopping to be done as least as possible, and it wants a great deal, which no other power except it's going to do. There to be a great deal of concern about that, because as a literal power, as a yang power, it's more solid in nature. So in this way, it's very different than Nai. It does not like guessing, and it does not like interpreting its data. So from its point of view, when you start doing that, you are taking away the foundation of the way it's structured, of the way it builds its model. You honor that model by remembering the details, by taking time to do that, by allowing the details to sift and become their true selves, and not forcing them too soon, trying to make them something else. All of the powers will do that. They'll do it to memories and speculation. They'll try to make them something. But the speculation memories actually are a pure information feed. They are a thing. And you simply must let it come in and, okay, that's the data. Stability, security, as I mentioned, they are concerned at the whittling away of that structure. So that's that. I don't need to go along in there because I basically said it. When they build their model on that, if you start to have pieces that aren't there, for example, you construct something architecturally and you start thinking about halfway through, you're like, have we been putting all the struts in on each of these levels? Think about the uneasy feeling that gives you when all of a sudden you realize things are built one on top of the other, very, very contiguous. Vai builds things the largest contiguous models. So contiguous strength comes from everything connects to everything else, and everything is what it is. If that changes, then this mountain of granite can become mud. It can become, just because you didn't, it's like the mortar becomes strong based on how much of the psyche's energy is allowed to give meticulous layers. The more layering, the more details, it strengthens it, and it becomes from clay to like granite, to like diamond. But it takes time. Vai needs time. Like Nai, it's slow. Nai and Vai are perceptions. They're slow perceptions, but they're very, very strong. Speed's not their thing, but strength is. So the more time they're allowed to do what they do, the model gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So there's a concern that, do you have enough information to get through life? Because that's Vai's point of view. You're only as good as what you know. And so from his point of view, it is true, because your Vai model is only as good as what you know. Reliability, consistency. This relates again to the repetition factor, that similar to you send through multiple lines of transmission, there can be a loss of fidelity. There can be a loss of fidelity just from doing it in the same transmission link more than one time. And again, Vai is concerned because it doesn't do this. So let's say you remember last Tuesday, and it was relevant. But then you kind of forget a bit. But then you remember it again, it's relevant again. You forget it. And this happens over the course of weeks, months, years. You keep forgetting it and remembering it on that sort of range of the semi-unconscious, where you can get things, they're not immediately available, they're not like totally forgotten. Okay, each time you go and get that, it has not transmitted through multiple conductors like the cafeteria experiment. It's technically just getting it, using it, dropping it. Getting it, using it, dropping it. For Vi, it will continue to do this every time, as mentioned before, and the data will not change. But other powers, both in the psyche and people and mojos out here, and systems, it's not just people, systems do this. Even a hammer being hit by a machine, so it's not just human error. The machine will keep hitting a certain place, it's supposed to. A Glock on the millionth or so shot, whatever, will misfire or will start to be a little off. Vi will note that 1,000,001 shot is a little different than the one before it. But there's a numbing that happens to a lot of people. You do 1,000,000 of anything, there's like the eyes glaze over. Vi is immune to that. Of all the powers, it doesn't have that. 1,000,001 shots is actually 1,000,001 data points, because they don't start making them the same. That's very important. That's why Vi is very large, like Nai, it's huge. Vi does not start grouping them on principles. It doesn't group them by how harmony felt, how loud the recoil was. It doesn't group them by who is in the room. A lot of people do that. They'll fire things or do things because people in the room, people aren't in the room, they kind of drone off. They're still doing the activity. Vi never drones off. That's why it's so meticulous, why it's so on point there, because if you're trying to figure out what all the rounds fired off of a gun are, what all the repetitions of a ballet movement are, you need all of them. You need to watch every rep. That's important. You don't get what you need unless you see all of them, because the power of Vi is to see what details out of all of the details, that's important, are the relevant ones. So let's say you're going to watch yourself performing, doing piano or something, and you want to pick out details that are good, that you want to highlight in yourself, and details that are bad you want to take out. You really want to do a fine-tooth comb. You need as many performances as possible. Once that comes in that Vi way of thinking, then you need all of them. Does that make sense? Or as many as you can get, because as much as information as you could on some past experience, you're contextualizing, you're paring down, your use of it in some system dynamics is only as good as the mass, the congregate of information that you took things from. For example, lawyers go in and they do cases, and they are using, if they're good, a very small portion of the Vi they consumed. But oftentimes you have to consume a lot of details in order to find out which ones are the ones that tell you who the murderer is, or who tells you that, oh, that means that really this person was not even a legal citizen at that time. It sounds funny, but you need all the details to actually then give some sort of pool. And Vi, again, kind of thing like scientific experiments, the idea that you need a minimum of a certain number in an experiment in order for the experiment to have weight, to have gravitas. That's the way Vi comes to things. It's concerned that things will be done too lightweight. It doesn't like that. It wants things to be taken seriously. And the way you do that is you have a lot of samples, a lot of details, a lot of memories, a lot of repetition, a lot of practice, a lot. A lot beats a little. So in that way it is very incremental, like V. It understands things in that way. Maintaining, preserving. That is related to the reliability and consistency. If you go into the waters to get a memory, it's not unlike going to a friend to ask them for some information or for some sugar. You know they have it, so it's just a question of getting it, right? If you get sloppier in the way you ask your friend for that, they may not give it to you, or they may give it to you in a less good way, so you're not getting the same thing. And that's only due to one thing: sloppiness. you did not maintain that relationship. You did not preserve that pipeline. Does that make sense? So Vai in itself is concerned with that every time it goes into the memories, it's like a museum. If you go in and just grab mummies to go show them to people, you damage the mummies. It's important. You don't do that, because then you can't show the mummy again in its original form. It's ruined. You've ruined it. So memories are like that. Once you kind of like muck them up, they're difficult to get back to their original pristine form. So when you go into the waters to get the memory, you have to make sure you don't get too quick-handed with it. Don't get too sloppy. Don't get careless. You must be concerned that you handle the information appropriately every time you take it out of its case. And you express to whoever you hand it off every time what information they're holding and its relevance and its importance, so they don't forget. And then when they give it back to you, you put it back carefully, reverently in its place. So why? You can find it again. And it's safe for the next time you go to look for it. So there's a concern, and that's why both Nai and Vai, they tend to give a masterfulness when they are well developed or high in the priority, because they're very concerned about the way things are done. And the only way to know a way is to know. And that's why what is known, what is unknown, that's what they're concerned about, because only if you remember or only if you guess the way to do something can you do it. All the other powers, from their point of view, are taking the greatest aggregate of information and then working it down into some sort of meaning for them. So they want to keep it at its most, and then, like, you know, Vai is very much like an archaeologist's way, you know what I mean, or a curator. And you have the record from Elvis, and when you take it out of the case, you must be reverent every time. And when you play the record, you must play it appropriately every time. And you must make sure that people are listening to know what they're hearing. Because at any point there can be loss of understanding or fidelity to the information, because you handle the record sloppily, it gets messed up. You scratch the record during play, it gets messed up, or is heard, interpreted, picked up as a signal by the other powers incorrectly. And if they don't know what they're hearing, for example, this recording is from 1973. That's important. Other powers, when they're having it, if they don't know it's from 1973, they could hear the voice, they could hear the data, they could see whatever the schematics. Are these schematics from 1973 or are these schematics from 2003? That's very, very different. Does it make sense? There might be nothing to note that. There might be nothing unless Vai has some way of noting it. It notes some number, notes some tear in a paper like an archaeologist. It notes some sort of discoloring. Ooh, that means it's from this dynasty. That's extremely relevant. If you didn't know that, this information could mean almost anything. And that's what Vai doesn't want. It doesn't want information to mean almost anything. It wants it to mean what it means. And it's concerned that that could be lost somehow, and it will be if it's not handled correctly. Historic roots, sense of tradition. That is because, very simply, it builds things up in that contiguous mound sort of way. So it gets its strength from what is underneath it. Everything that's underneath it is what gives that sense of certainty, that sense of knowing, that sureness, that masterfulness, because it knows the ground it's standing on, and it has to. But when it does, it gets tremendous amount of confidence from that. Yeah, as far as momentum, Vai gets a great deal of confidence and energy from knowing where everything it's touching comes from. What connects. Ni connects things in a all at once, all the possible connections. Vai is a very, and the thigh bone is connected to the knee bone. It likes to know, in this kind of like, you know, a train system, whatever, what connects to everything else. Similar to almost like a picture. If you go down deep enough into the picture, you get to the pixels. And technically it is a huge amount of pixels, and that's why Vai is massive. Vai, the amount of information that it uses is a lot, because it goes down into the pixels and says, the slighter shade of red is connected to the greater shade of red, which is connected to the orange shade of red. And when you pull back, that creates the entire picture you're looking at, the Mona Lisa. But when you go in, it is actually strokes. For example, so in a digital picture or an actual real life picture, it is actually, wow, that is 1 stroke, 2 stroke, half a stroke, a stroke combined with another stroke. And if you go deep enough into the detail, it is one detail connected to another detail completely and contiguously. And if you don't go like that, you can miss something. Both Nye and Vi are kind of like internal investigators of the psyches. They go about different ways, but they are trying to like find out the case. And in Vi's way of looking at it, there's information. For example, the murderer is in the room. Sort of like, you know what I mean? The evidence for the crime is here, like it knows that, but it just has to go get it. Yeah, it just has to go get it. So the concern is, will it remember to do it, and will other people remember to do it? And when you go to get it, did you get the right one? Because you can remember to go get the information, but if you got the wrong information, if there's a loss of fidelity, then you lost it, you missed it, and then you lose. And that's unheroic. And Vi is a hero like the other siblings. It wants to win. It wants to win for itself. It wants the psyche to win. And so therefore, it is concerned that it does not forget to get that very, very valuable remembered information. Those past maps and experiences that tell you what you know to date. Obviously, there's a theme overall of certainty. And that's because, well, we won't say what it is, but we'll say why certainty relates to concern. If you are certain, is everyone seeing what you're seeing? So that's why their concern comes in, because Vi, since it has, to its point of view, at least what it sees, the accurate information, there is the concern of, I don't know why everyone else is acting so certain. How are you acting so certain? Because you don't have the information I have. So that's its concern is that everyone's running around feeling certain incorrectly. You shouldn't. It's concerned why everyone's feeling so certain with faulty data, insufficient data, lack of evidence. People, you should be feeling uncertain. Finally, that distinct signal of concern can have a more heroic signal, or less so, and there's like a range of that, like all the powers. So the heroic sort of subdivisions of that, or subsignals, would be meticulous, unfailing, and staunch. So the concern for getting it right means that they will stay on things longer. They will push further to get those details because they're very important to them. So they will miss less than other people will. And that's heroic, that's being meticulous. Because many times, small mistakes will cost you. And so being meticulous takes the small mistakes away, and that's very cool. Unfailing, it goes back to the being able to do things under a lot of repetition or under a lot of stress and still remembering them accurately. That's very important, because you may be doing something under pressure, and if that affects the way you remember something, that's important. Memories are very much affected by other psychic powers, other things going on, stress, whatever. So it's important that that not happen so the data is kept correct. If so, you'll be unfailing because other people will start to fail. The data will start to get corrupt under stress, under repetition. And finally, staunch. That relates to certainty, is trying to move Vi in a different direction than it's already going is very difficult. This is not like it's sort of like, it's a kind of movement, but it's a very solid kind of movement. It's moving forward based on this step leads to this step, leads to this step, so there's no feeling of unsureness under the feet. So it's not going to be backed off. Similar to Nye this way, it's very impervious to other people saying you're going the wrong way when it looks at its map and goes, no, I've got the map. So if it thinks it has the map and it can see the steps and one thing connects to the other, then you just don't have the right data. So it is very staunch. It's hard to move off a position or a course, a direction, if it feels that it has actually plotted the data points and they all connect correctly. And connects correctly completely. If it has enough data, then it's good to go. Downside is it can be seen as nitpicky, boring, and rigid because of not wanting to come away from seeing things a certain way or using specific information for specific things. For example, Ni might take the point of view of maybe non-specific information is very helpful here. That happens a lot. Sometimes something that's not specifically related can be very, very relevant. It just wasn't thought to go there. But Vi doesn't want to do that, but the more developed Vi is, the more, like all the powers, it has connection with V, and it has connection with Ni. both its inspiration and its modulation, then it will be more powerful, more robust, more nuanced, and therefore more heroic. Sound good?
Yep.
Take
Great.
it? Okay.
Yep.